And we're live. It is Friday, March the 28th, which is to say the third from the last day of March, the year of our Lord 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. And I just want to respond to something that Alicia Wanless just said, which is, she was going to check on the guest, Lucy Jackson, who has just shown up. And she said, "You do your rant. I'm going to check on the guest." And I just want to say that these monologues are not a rant. A rant is when you talk disparagingly in a kind of hurried fashion about subjects that you don't like and you complain about things. And I would like to point out that in these monologues, I always point out that the sun is shining, the birds are chirping. I always point out that it's going to be a great day. I may throw in some profanity after the word great, but the point is, I'm not ranting. I'm saying encouraging words. I often throw in something about, the fact that we are persevering against the turning of this country into a authoritarian menace that attacks its neighbors. And I say something about puppies. Um, either of the printed variety on the shirt or of the live variety on the shirt. Um, and none of this qualifies as a rant. So I would just like to say, um, Ms. Information Environment herself, you shouldn't be throwing information pollution about my morning words of encouragement into the information ecosystem like that. I have an announcement this morning. The puppy does have a name, and it is relevant to today's subject of discussion. The puppy's name is Cleo. Cleo being the muse of history. And so here she is. No, at the end of the day, Kate Klonick, I did resist the urge to name her Houthi PC small group, though I was sorely tempted. And for those who want E.J. Wittes's favorite names that were not accepted, please consult today's Dog Shirt Daily, which has a list of suggested reject names for the puppy. Cleo, for those who are have been asking, Cleo will not formally be a co-host of the show. And the reason is that she does not recruit guests. That's what defines, she just lies here and chews on my finger. Look, folks, we are not allowed to have fun anymore. We are allowed to have sedate monologues at the beginning of the show. And one of the revolutionary features of this show, and there are many, is that sometimes those sedate monologues come, in response to something that one of my co-hosts said literally seconds before we went live. And another one of the revolutionary features is that the Greek chorus does get to settle this argument right now, folks, in the chat. Is this a rant or not? And we're going to just, give your comments and put Alicia in her place here. Another...
John Hawkinson's already said, wait, so is this a rant about rants?
Look, Vox Populi is going to rule here. And it's, Vox Day, and there's nothing I can do about it.
A rant about rants, a rant.
So Look, um, we are here. Oh, the last revolutionary feature of the show, which I will mention, as I've mentioned, there are many, is that sometimes on this show, and this is the only show on morning television of which this is true, there is not just a live studio audience, but it gave itself a name. It gave itself the name Greek Chorus in an earlier iteration of the show, and that has stuck around. Sorry, Cleo's being a little bit and and sometimes we have a guest who is actually well positioned to talk to us about the name that the Greek chorus has given to itself in the ultimate meta. And so I'm going to conclude this rant about rants by pointing out that we have a guest about our Greek chorus's self-naming convention. Lucy Jackson, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Where am I? What is going on? I'm looking forward to finding out.
that was your Admiral Stockdale moment. Yeah, so you are on Dog Shirt TV, and it is a fucking revolution in morning television. Alicia, do you want to introduce our guest?
Yes, because we deliberately went out into the world to find Dr. Lucy Jackson to come on to talk about Greek choruses, and she's got a lovely video. If anybody hasn't looked at this, it's about a 12-minute explainer about all things Greek chorus, and it's great. Lucy's an associate professor in the Department of Classics and Ancient History at Durham University in the UK. And today we're going to be pestering her about all things Greek chorus. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you so much. It is extremely delightful for me to be able to talk about choruses because not enough people talk about them. And a blanket apology for my voice. I have caught some kind of delightful cold off my 3-year-old son.
It happens. All right. So, on in the Greek chorus here, which is our name for our chat, and it, by the way, named itself that once upon a time in the lost in the myths of time. People know what a Greek chorus is. But out there in YouTube land, which is where people watch this show if they are not paid subscribers, which they should become, there may be some people out there who don't know what a Greek chorus is, or may just have a sense of a Greek chorus in the dimmest sense, but, as people who come out and intone things. But for those who are, need the basics, what is a Greek chorus?
It is a great question, actually, and not a straightforward question. I think the thing that people might have heard the most frequently about what a Greek chorus is that it is a group of people who, quote, comment on the action. And that sometimes can exist in a play context, but it often is expanded into when people are talking about the choric in like cinema or in other media. And it has this sense, I think, in the wider world of a group of people who are bystanders. Now, what the ancient Greek chorus was is something a little bit different. It was a group of people, it was people who came together to sing and dance. Crucially, they would do both of those things together. And it was a way of processing cultural knowledge and cultural events. So you would have choruses that would come together to celebrate major life events. Like 10 days after the birth of a child, you would have people coming together to celebrate that, and they would sing and dance in a chorus. At a wedding, you would have a male chorus and a female chorus coming to do a kind of battle of the sexes thing, but all together singing and dancing. At funerals, you would have a kind of chorus, people coming together to sing and dance and move to process this life event, this cultural event. So that was the broader context of what a Greek chorus was. It just involves lots of people, and it involves unison, singing, and movement. But the place where I come at the chorus is specifically in ancient Greek drama. And the presence of a chorus, which is in tragedy, it's between 12 and 15 people. In comedy, it's 24 people, so quite a bit bigger. The chorus is the defining feature of ancient Greek drama. You have no ancient Greek drama that exists without a chorus, but you do not have many other genres of drama that have a chorus as part of it. So it really is the kind of central thing. Again, not something that we might associate with Greek drama. We think of the big characters, the myths, wailing, death, blood. But actually, it's the chorus. The chorus defines ancient Greek drama.
All right, we got so much going on here. So first of all, because we are really, I think, the only show that has a Greek chorus, we got to ask you, does our chat qualify as a Greek chorus by definitionally, or is it not because people aren't speaking in unison and there's no dancing?
Well, I think you could be clever about it and find a way of making the chat choral. Certainly, unison singing and someone saying, we don't do any singing, which is a shame, I think. It'd be great if we could have simultaneous voice notes kind of all being played together. I think that would be a great sound. You do occasionally have in Greek choruses different voices coming in. You have harmony. You don't just have a single line or a single voice. So in that sense, we have lots of people who are here for the same purpose, thinking on the same subjects, responding to different things that they may have seen. But really, I think we might think more about what this chorus is doing in how it's acting on the hosts, on how it might be acting on the guests, because the chorus does not, as you may have guessed from my quotation marks at the beginning, the chorus does not just comment on the action. The chorus often gets involved. It can get involved in terms of drama physically. It can get involved in drama in terms of changing the plot. So really, my question to the chat is, do you feel like you are as involved as the hosts are in you? And if you are, then yeah, sure, you're a Greek chorus.
You're
Yeah.
already ahead of a question because Laura Donna had asked, does the chorus ever change the narrative?
100%, Laura Donna. It 100% does. Not in as frequent a way as perhaps individual characters do, but I'll give you a little example. Now, this maybe some people say, that doesn't count. The famous story of Medea, a very powerful woman who is betrayed by the Greek hero Jason, and in vengeance decides that the most painful thing that she can do to Jason.
This is dark. This is going to go dark fast.
Content warning. Content warning. This is super dark. Decides that I'll say it nicely first. The best way to punish her husband is to remove his chance at continuing his line, shall we say. So he murders his new wife. No more children, Jason. And she also murders his existing children, which happen to be her own 2 sons as well. So she does this really horrific act of self-harm for the purpose of vengeance. But the chorus here do in fact change the course of the action because they know about this plan. They are horrified by this plan. They tell Medea not to do it, but when they have a chance, they don't tell anyone else. They let it happen. They stay silent. And that is something that actually does really change the course of the action. You also get other instances where the chorus kind of mislead or misguide people who come on stage and say, oh no, he went that way. And in that sense, they're kind of messing up with the action. They're not in the same way as actors, but they do change. And then this in a very late play, actually, there's an example of them physically intervening and preventing soldiers from capturing a young woman that they want to take away. So they do intervene.
And so Steve asks in the chat what voice the chorus represents. But I want to expand that question a little bit and ask what we know about how the chorus developed, that you would have this external voice that's kind of the voice of the playwright, but kind of not, and kind of the voice of random frogs, and kind of the voice of, the angel on Medea's shoulder. Like, Where did this come from and who is it?
It's such an interesting question, and I don't think I don't think there's one answer. I think outside of drama, the Greek chorus is the voice of a kind of understood cultural knowledge, cultural history, shared understanding of um, the important things in life: birth, death, managing people who are extremely powerful and yet must be part of the community. That's what the chorus does outside of drama. But inside of drama, it has these multiple personalities and it can shift at any one moment. So it doesn't have a single voice. So in the simplest terms, you could break it down into three levels. They carry that sense of the chorus outside of drama, the voice of culture, the voice of shared ritual and understanding about life. They then have a fictional identity, so they can be animals, frogs, birds, often women. They can be enslaved people. They have that fictional identity, which is rationalized within the course of the play. But they also are performing as themselves, as people who are taking part in this act of theatre. In the same way that when we might go and see a performance, we know that they're pretending. We know that they're pretending. We know that they are, I don't know, Brie Larson, as well as being the character that they're playing, Electra, on stage. So at any one moment, those three identities can be deployed by the poet to complicate what's going on, or to make us think, oh, was that about me, or was that about her? So they don't have a universal voice, and that's what's so frustrating about them. You can't pin them down. They keep you questioning, they keep provoking, which again is maybe something that the group chat here shares. They're not one thing.
There's also like instances where the chorus is talking at the audience in a way, like in Clouds, where they're kind of chastising the audience for not appreciating the play. And the play has, I'm going to let you explain it, but like a moralizing kind of aspect to it and criticizing um, sophists.
Yeah, the Clouds is an interesting one, actually, and I'll try not to get too technical on it. There was a convention.
I'm here for the
Okay, great.
technical.
There was a convention in ancient comedy where there would be sometimes a certain point in the play when the chorus would seem to very much kind of drop their fictional character and speak as if they were the poet. But of course, like, the playwright is able to use this as a way of saying stuff that maybe he couldn't actually say IRL in real life. So often he would say, like, audience, what are you talking about? I'm the greatest, I'm the best, you should be voting my play as number one. So we do have that convention happening. And so it would have been like understood as like, oh, this is the bit. We don't necessarily think, oh, right, Aristophanes is telling us off. Okay, yeah, sure. It's like, it's all part of the performance. But what makes the Clouds super interesting is that the version of the text that we have, because of course we don't have a video recording from when it was first performed, the text is actually seems to be a revised version that got changed by Aristophanes after that first performance. And he put in this little bit of being like, you didn't appreciate this comedy the first time around, you idiots. Why did you vote that other guy? I'm so much more subtle. I'm so much more clever than him. And so we're not actually entirely sure if the text of the play that we have was fully performed. And it's more he's just after the fact, he's done like a reply to his critics of being like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. I'm genius. Fuck you. Oh, sorry.
No. It's perfectly
It's
allowed.
Aristophanic language, I'm allowed to say.
Yeah, John Roush may have a problem with it, but that's
He's not
okay.
here.
He's not here. So, all right, there's a couple of other. So, one interesting thing about our Greek chorus is that they are allowed to interrupt us at any time by showing up on screen. And they can do that as individuals, but they can't do that as a collective. And so I'm curious whether there's any, and at some point, I'm sure that some member of the chorus will exercise this prerogative. Is there any example of Greek choruses whose members function as individuals, or do they always say the same thing together?
The short answer is we think once. In our very, very small percentage of tragedy and comedy that survives, there is one instance where it seems like every single person in the chorus got one line and they're voicing slightly different opinions. And that happens in the first play of a trilogy of plays by Aeschylus, the elder of the Greek tragedians that we know. This trilogy of plays called the Oresteia. And it happens in the first play, the play we know as the Agamemnon, when they hear Agamemnon being murdered inside of the house and they freak out. The chorus are like, what are we going to do? And then there are these 12 little couplets of lines where they say, should we do this? I don't agree with that. What about this thing? And it's a kind of dramatization of someone needs to be being deliberate here. Someone needs to be going in and like, applying pressure to the wound and getting the axe off Clytemnestra, but they're not. They're busy like, I don't know what to do. So it's a moment which is deliberate, not like saying, oh, these guys have a difference of opinion. It's a kind of way of showing the inactivity sometimes that happens when people are all voicing their different opinions. There are other instances where you have groups of choruses kind of split off and they have a real difference of opinion. And that too is kind of like all for the purposes of representing something. But the idea of the chorus being a group of individuals is something that is very, very common to see in modern productions of Greek tragedy. But it really doesn't exist as an idea, because that's the antithesis of what a chorus is. This is the representative of something that transcends the individual, that is bigger than the individual, that really challenges our sense of ourselves as individual.
And you can have more than one chorus in a play.
Right.
That was a setup. Aristophanes is the one that I know the best, so I'll just keep coming back to him and his criticisms.
Right. No, we do have two different choruses. In his Lysistrata, maybe that's the one that you were thinking of. We have a chorus of old men, a chorus of old women, and they have this, this two tribes go to war moment, which then kind of collapses into a very sweet thing where one of the old men gets something in their eye and a nice lady from the lady chorus says, oh, let me help you with that, dear. And so they find a way of kind of resolving themselves. But yeah, it's a way of representing group conflicts rather than conflict within a group, I think. And it's the same with tragedy when you get multiple choruses in tragedy too.
So I want to ask how this died out, because it seems to me it is basically, as you say, it's kind of the defining feature of Greek drama. But it doesn't go away entirely, right? There's a chorus in Henry V, which is usually now performed as a single narrator, but it's actually written as a chorus. And more importantly, it seems to me, in the 18th century and well into the 19th century, the tradition gets adopted by operas. And so if you look at, and it's particularly pointed, and Richard Wattenbarger may be here and may have thoughts on this, but it's particularly pointed in Handel operas and oratorios, where you have these choruses that are, a sort of complex commentary on their kind of characters, but they're also just kind of expositing on the action. And so I'm curious what the and of course they're called choruses, which is, you could call them choirs, you could call them uh, all kinds of things, but the people, like, it comes to be known as choral music, right? And so I'm curious what the relationship is. Does it die for 1500 years and then kind of come back? Or is there a through line of chorusing?
I think the answer is there is a through line of chorusing, but you're right that the position shifts and that it is found in other places. There is, in terms of drama, there's something very central to the chorus, which is that it is expensive. It is very expensive to get 15 people, first of all, to commit to prepare a performance, let alone 24, to rehearse them, to look after them, to feed them, to house them. And so at a certain point, there is an economic pressure that comes in. However, the cultural choruses I was talking about that form the backdrop to Greek dramatic choruses, those do continue. Those continue for centuries and centuries. And even if they don't exist in the same way in terms of festival, they find other places. Here, I must hold my hands up and say, I am not an expert on Byzantine culture. But I think you do get a certain amount of the choral in things like the growth of Christianity in different ways. Now, my own pet theory about the turning point for the chorus actually comes in the 16th century, which is that with Calvinism, with this idea that you can have a direct line to the guy upstairs, that you do not have to go through others, this allows you to dispense with the need for community, for a group, in order to command the attention of the Almighty, of the divine. And so it becomes less important. You yourself can commune with that larger cultural spirit, that larger cultural knowledge. And so it becomes less central, less important. You can make the same kind of argument about like the importance of the individual in like a late capitalist neoliberal society as well. Like being with others is something that is uncomfortable and which we eschew. However, humans need it. We need it. So even if it's something that we may not find always palatable or something that is attractive, we find other ways of exploring that. And it is one of my favorite things to do is to always to try and locate where is the choral, where we might not expect it to be. I have colleagues who really feel it when they're in like sports stadia, when they're in the audience and they are with other people and there might be a sudden impetus to rush the field or something. There is a sense of community of we have shared language here, we have shared songs, we have shared movements, and that there is a sense of power in that. And that's what I think really gets to the heart of the choral that we still are are attracted to, but it's very dangerous as well. And I mean, thinking again about kind of maybe moving on from Handel, but like the Wagnerian chorus, the menace of that, I think, that was then mobilized in very concrete ways in the 20th century. And indeed, I mean, again, I have a wonderful colleague who's done work on they're called the Sprechchor of under Hitler Germany, where people would be brought together to sing and dance together in order to do something to them, which was not great, but fed a need within them of being more than an individual, of being with others, of subsuming that sense of individual responsibility. So I think it's always there. It's always part of this push-pull within us of being more than ourselves, but needing to assert our own agency in the world.
So interesting. I mean, I've always thought of the Handel and Bach oratorios as sort of the closest thing in music to Greek drama. Um, so down to Handel in Israel and Egypt even having a frogs chorus, albeit which I can't imagine was an accident, right? Albeit it's a biblical frogs, the river burst forth with frogs, rather than the sound of the frogs. But I really think the idea that you have the soloists in these oratorios the being the characters essentially, and then the chorus being the people, being the voice of the narrator. It just has this really strong, and you see it really intensely in Bach, in the St. Matthew's and St. John's Passions, which are really even structured, because of course they're Greek texts. Um, and this of course evolves into opera, but which is much less Greek and much more, um, I mean, much more Shakespearean in its dramatic structure. But I think it's always interested me that that the the relationship between the soloists and the chorus is in the oratorios and the early Monteverdi and Handel operas are really seem to me self-consciously structured on um I mean, some of them are neither tragedies nor histories, but there's something very Greek. I don't know.
There is something that I think I haven't talked about so far, which is exactly there in the choruses that you're talking about, which is the equally important role of the chorus to provide thrilling, aesthetic, and affective, if you'll allow me to use that Ponzi word, experience. That it's a way of getting to the audience in a way that doesn't engage the intellect necessarily, that isn't about logic and rationale, but it hits you like a ton of bricks in the chest. And it does that through powerful movement, through powerful music. I mean, just thinking about the St. Matthew Passion gives me tingles about some of those moments where you just feel completely overwhelmed, in a way that isn't about like, oh, that's an interesting chord progression. Oh, I can see what they've done there with that comment. It's nothing to do with that. It's about accessing a different kind of knowledge and a different kind of experience. And in the hands of real geniuses, which I believe a lot of the Greek tragedians were, which I believe Bach was, which I believe a lot of these composers are, they are using both these ways of thinking, the intellectual and something that is much deeper and more in our bones as humans, to get us to feel complicated, to get us to think, but think on two levels. I actually recently saw a production, which I was not expecting to enjoy at all, of an Oedipus in London. And that is one of the Greek tragedies that's all about rationality. It's all about Oedipus being able to unpick this riddle, this new riddle about who killed King Laius. And it was interspersed with not singing, but a professional dance group. And the movements that they did were quite different from the kind of thing you might usually see in a Greek tragedy. It was very much modern dance. It was very much its own kind of dance, but it completely blew me away. There were other things that I thought about the production, but I left the theatre grinning because I had been affected like this. I had been hit by a ton of bricks in a way that made me think about the environment, about mystery, about faith, about knowledge. And all of that was to do with the interplay of what was going on in stage with the characters using their words and being very rational, and what was happening in between with these breathing pauses of, how does this feel? This feels big. And making that dialogue for myself. I thought it was a fantastic experience.
Might be moving this away from the chorus specifically, but more towards how plays interact with ancient Athenian society, and also a little bit, I'm going to go off onto like Plato's criticism of it. So there's just bear with me here because there's so many things that are coming out from listening to you. One, like going back to the kind of emergence of choruses, and how that might have been something of a natural phenomenon in a way, right? Like how we get into a group, and if we all start clapping, there's a tendency for people to start syncing their clapping unconsciously, and the longer it goes, that kind of thing. So one is that it strikes me, I'm going to stop here with the emergence of it, but like, how do Greek choruses actually emerge? What do we know about that? There does seem to be this kind of like natural tendency for people to kind of amass together in a way sometimes?
They're from our earliest representations of society in ancient Greece. There seem to be representations of people moving together in time, and because obviously these are on pottery, actually, then we can't see if they're singing, but that seems to be something that is celebrated, that is centered. Now, we get a neat little story about how we get to the dramatic chorus from Aristotle in his Poetics. But I always want to put a little health warning on Aristotle's Poetics, an incredibly influential, useful document, but crucially, written at the end of the 4th century BCE, so like 150 years after the time when Aeschylus was writing. And crucially, also, seems to be actually lecture notes rather than like fully expressed prose. It is incredibly cryptically concise, is what one scholar has described it as. So very unclear, actually. People have extrapolated wildly about what this is. But he gives us this very neat little story about how comedy as a genre emerged from a particular kind of ritual where people were getting together and shouting abuse at each other. And then he says, and tragedy emerged, he says, from the dithyramb, which is a certain kind of chorus that existed pre-drama, of people coming together to tell myth in groups, in large groups of about 50, we think. So that's a very attractive story. He's closer to it than we are. Maybe he's right, maybe not, but it's very neat, isn't it? It's very like, oh yeah, so let's just get together in this big group and tell a myth. Ooh, it would be kind of fun if maybe one person did a little conversation with us as a group. Wouldn't that be fun? And that's how drama is born. That's what he says. He says the first actor was this guy Thespis, which is where we get our word thespian from, and that this was the invention of drama, when you start to have dialogue. And then Aeschylus introduced the second actor, Sophocles introduced the third actor, and Bob's Your Uncle, we got the genre of Greek tragedy. So that's one story. That's one story about how it emerged.
Well, and it's also such a fascinating time because it's only like around now where we get the birth of history as a actual type of discipline or a concept, with Thucydides and like trying to be objective and writing that. But coming back to that period then, and then the kind of group think and the emergence of that, we also have this emergence of this radical idea in democracy. And again, Aristophanes, I apologize, in that there's a lot of criticism, or there's some criticism in that society for that kind of collective decision making with a wider public, especially one that may not be overly educated. So I'm kind of curious, is there any connection with or any play with some of the plays about that kind of groupthink and using the chorus in that way, and how that reflects the challenges with politics and society at that time?
It's a really attractive story. And it's one that people really went for in the 1990s, post-Cold War. People were suddenly like, look, you see, communism, boo, democracy, yay! And they decided to bring in democracy and what was going on in 5th century Athens in a really big way. And that happened in the scholarship. Not on purpose. People thought that they were just being good historians, but actually it was a lot of contemporary politics was being brought into making this exact connection about choruses, about group decisions, and a dialogue about democracy, and a celebration of it as well.
The wisdom of crowds,
if you will. However, what you get when you start to zoom out a little bit, both in terms of chronology and in terms of geography, is that there were just as many tyrants using tragedy, using choruses, as there were democratic societies. And this is something that's come out recently in a really wonderful set of studies about theatre across the Mediterranean and beyond. We now have a much greater appreciation even from the middle of the 5th century. Theatre was being performed far beyond Athens itself, in the immediate Attican surroundings, but also as we move into the 4th century, places like Northern Africa and Cyrene, you have the North Black Sea and Ukraine, theatre seems to be performed there. So we're talking about huge distances, a huge variety of cultures that were engaging with this art form and with the choral element in it. And I think it goes back to something I was saying before about this impossibility of pinning the chorus down. it has this wonderful representation of the importance and centrality of the people, of the community, of seeing groups on stage making decisions, being involved, being engaged intellectually and emotionally with what's going on. But it also does allow us to see what happens when you're in a group. Inactivity, like in that example from the Agamemnon, you don't move if you're a group, or it's slow to move if you're a group. And the way that your impetus for action can be dulled in some way because you're having to bring everyone else along with you, because you're having to disagree with people but make do. And they were very, very aware of that. So this is why you have, tyrants in Sicily and Macedon who are absolutely crazy for choral art, because there's something very heady about a group of people all being together, all doing the same thing, that gives you a sense of control.
Sorry, Ben.
Been any study of? Oh no, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to ask was, I mean, I'm only as more familiar with Athens and Sparta in a very limited period of time. But speaking of drama being used in other city-states that had tyrants, were playwrights as able to critique their society through plays in cities that had tyranny as much as they were in that period of Athens before the war?
So we only have a really small amount of evidence on this. And so there's a real temptation for the reader of the evidence to kind of make a call. So you can read a play, for example, like Euripides' Bacchae. Some people think it was actually written in Macedon for the tyrant there, for the king. And people say, well, that makes complete sense, because it's very religiously conservative, and that suits a kind of tyrannical, fascistic mindset. So, of course, yes, Euripides was pandering to the tyrant. There's also an example of one of these tyrants himself writing a tragedy, Wherein in Sicily. And was it any good? I don't know. The sources aren't brave enough to tell us. But we do have sort of some fragments or a better idea about a play that Aeschylus wrote for the tyrant in Sicily, Women of Etna, which seems to be, again, a kind of like, let's give you a nice foundation myth for your story, and isn't this wonderful, and a celebration of this particular culture, not going to critique it very much. However, because of the richness of the genre of tragedy, and in some cases comedy too, although comedy traveled less well than tragedy did, there's an element in the tragedy of critique, of reflection, which in and of itself is very satisfying to a certain kind of conservative liberal mindset. You can sit there in the audience and be like, oh yes, we're thinking through all of the issues. Oh yes. Oh yeah, no, is that right? Yeah, okay, I've done my thinking now. Okay, bye, back to oppressing people. That can be just as effective as in reinforcing a tyrannical mindset. So we don't really know.
This brings me, and Ben, then I'll stop. But this brings me then to my last question in this chain: is that, was there criticism of plays such that it was questioned for its distortion of reality, that it was maybe problematic for those information ecosystems?
We don't know enough about how the plays were actually consumed or received at the time. I think it would be so fascinating to know. In comedy, it seems like we have a better sense about how the plays went down, because the playwrights then go on to talk about it and bitch about it. As you well know, I'll say, you audiences, you weren't clever enough to appreciate this play of mine, or you were too cowardly not to then sort of take what I told you about the General Cleon and not vote him into office like 3 months after I told you about how awful he was. But again, because it's in this frame of, it's just a play, it's just drama, people are able to kind of switch off, I think, and say, oh, well, I can see what anything, like it's separate from real life. And I think the example of Cleon actually is a really, really good one, that you can have a play that completely rips him to shreds, that lays into this politician. And yes, maybe he did actually get pissed off and try and sue the playwright for it. But that also would make a great story that makes Aristophanes look good too. Like, I was so out there, I really told the truth, and so he tried to shut me down, like, I'm being cancelled. What a great way of kind of elevating himself as this really right-on political playwright. Whether it has any reflection in reality, I don't know. I think there would be people being like, it's just a play, it's not that deep, let's go and oppress some Milesians right now.
Um, I am interested in the relationship between chorus and communal prayer, which we know a fair bit about, at least in the Jewish context, from there, because it has these modern lineal descendants. But you have a tradition of praying in groups. That's a little bit chorus-like. You have a tradition of um, one actor doing something, i.e., a priest, usually a sacrifice of some kind, in dialogue with the mass. And my impression is that that has a significant Greco-Roman element, as well as presumably all the little cults of Baal, as well as Judaism. And of course, it becomes a big thing in the 7th century in Islam, right? Which it remains to this day. So I'm curious how we should think about the relationship between the actor and the chorus with respect to the relationship between the priest, not in the Catholic sense of the word or the Anglican sense of the word priest, but in the ritual sense of the word, and the, what you will, congregation, or in 10 grown men in the Hebrew tradition, right? Or the people in the Muslim tradition.
This is a question that was being wrestled with in 5th century, in 5th and 4th century Athens. And if I can kind of slightly rephrase, but I think the meaning is the same, not so much chorus and actor, but chorus and leader. Because something that you can't do as a chorus is spontaneously compose and choreograph song and dance. Someone has to be telling you what to do. And that someone may be a kind of culturally handed down, like, these are the steps, but there has to be someone who holds that knowledge and passes it on and preserves it in some way. And people were very sensitive to what that person is, the responsibility of that person, for either helping it be a good chorus or a bad chorus. And this is why we have these set bits in tragedy and in comedy. The technical term is amoibaia, when you have an individual who is interacting in turn with a choral group. And later on, we have this with antiphony, which of course becomes a huge thing in classical music as well. You have a single voice and then a response, and then it goes and it's passed from one from the other. Sometimes it's 2 choral groups, but often it's a way of an individual interacting with a group. And that dynamic is very charged and very dangerous. A group needs a leader, but a leader also then can really do a lot of damage to that group too. And here, maybe let's get on to Plato, because he was extremely aware of the usefulness of that dynamic. And a lot of people, talk about like Plato's negative view of drama, stemming from the Republic. But I actually spent a good chunk of time during my PhD looking at his last dialogue, The Laws, which is often said to kind of describe the second best city. If the Republic describes the best city, he kind of moderates himself a little bit later in old age and says, okay, well, we can't have perfection. Let's try for something practicable here. And that's the city that he built in The Laws. And in that city, he sets out in quite explicit detail how many choral songs and dances everyone is going to be doing every day, and who is going to be in charge of the content that they are going to sing and dance. And he construes the dynamic as one where, as soon as you are in a chorus, you are like a child. You are as if it's you are drunk, and you have absolutely no access to rational thought whatsoever. So that was how he thought of this dynamic between individual and chorus, as immediately pliant and huge responsibility for the leader, because it suited him. That kind of, because ultimately Plato's a fascist, and that's the kind of dynamic that I'm not wrong. That's the kind of dynamic that he thought was going to be useful societally. You have complete control. You have one person who is brainwashing everyone, and that's how he construed the importance of the choral group and the impact of song and dance on the body, being able to control. But you can bet that there were some other opinions available about what can happen in the choral group and the agency of a choral group. But I think that agency is difficult. It's not easy to pin down, and it's also incredibly disruptive to people who are trying to run a society. But it's the thing that I think is the most
He's
interesting.
kind of like I was going to say, Plato and Aristotle, they're kind of like the original complainers about novelties coming into the ecosystem, right? Like plays being bad and people not really having a good sense of reality. Also, like writing is going to kill the spoken word and change everything for us, and the technology is bad. Ben, you've got Greek chorus in here, so.
So I have an extremely loud woodpecker right outside my window.
We cannot
So
hear
I'm
it.
going to try.
I
Well,
did.
that's
I heard
because
it
it
right there.
paused. Um, but if you hear a rattling, it's the Greek chorus of woodpeckers. John Hawkinson.
I'm here to demonstrate the ability of the chorus to arrive on screen. I was hoped to be joined by Joel and four others, or three others, but
Well, you guys
because
should show up and speak in
not yet
unison.
happened. So I don't have anything articulate to say, but this has been a wonderful conversation.
That was such a letdown, John.
Yeah, it was.
But
Um,
actually,
and
I
for
would like,
all of you
actually,
who,
Ben, can you tie this into Cleo, though? Either
uh,
historically or present day Cleo, who I will always think of as the wee toad.
well, yeah, so let me just say, for those who were really committed to Hootie and Weetoad and Witoad, I apologize. We only get one name per puppy, and the name has to last a lifetime, or at least a puppy lifetime. So,
I am
we're
going to challenge you on that. We had a discussion in the chat, excuse me, the Greek chorus, possibly before you arrived this morning, about dogs with multiple names and how some of them, may be called different things by different people at different times, and that's okay.
So I agree with that, but I do, there are constituencies in the family, and, some of them were not thrilled about naming the dog after a terrorist organization, and some of them are less concerned than Anna Bauer is about who the administrator of Doge is. And so I'm just saying we're balancing a lot of equities here, and when we can all agree, we do like to proceed by consensus.
I have a controversial question now that you've got two of the Greek chorus up here, and John didn't really come with a question.
And
Who is
you guys have to answer in unison. So that's
who
the
is the leader of this chorus? Because Lucy said there's a leader in a chorus.
We cannot disclose that information.
He's right. It's our secret.
all right.
Although the leader of today's chorus might be Richard Wattenbarger in absentia.
Yeah, I mean, he is the member of the Greek chorus who would know certainly the most about the choral music tradition. Um, so yeah, he's Lucy. He's a musicologist who knows a great deal of particularly 19th century music, but is also in all areas of
You're really
music
doing
history. All
this.
right, we're getting there with a chorus here.
Oh.
All right, but you guys got to do something in
You gotta
unison here. It's
chorusy.
not just enough to be here. You have to.
Oh God.
Who else is going to
But-
join?
Is it a
But
rant?
more-
Is it a rant?
Well, yeah. But do I have to do it in interpretive dance? This is what I.
I think you all need the hand motions.
Otherwise,
and
it's not a chorus. It's not a chorus if you ain't singing and dancing.
That's a pretty big ask.
Careful what you ask for.
That's right.
It's a revolution in morning television.
It sure
I mean,
is.
if we could get the audience to do a choral interpretive dance and unison now in the last 5 minutes of the show, I think
today you want it? Today?
our claim to be a revolution in morning
Joel's doing it.
television would be
I was just
enhanced.
stretching my coffee.
I also just want to say to all members of the Greek chorus who are not on screen now, your commitment is being tested now. Are you up to the challenge?
I think, Ben, to tie it into a comment you made earlier this week about the guest speaker at the University of Maryland, I think we are all frogs. And so, as a nod to Aristophanes, we should all, Joel and Laura and Nicholas, join me in saying "rekakakak-coax."
But you should put the whole chorus in
Say it
the
again.
chat
Say it
so
again,
that people
slowly,
can
John.
join and do it with you.
Lead us, John.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's always hard to do unison with live stream video, but we'll try again.
I'll conduct.
Yes. Oh, well, I guess
You are the leader.
Sorry, what, Alicia?
So Ben is the leader. He just said he was going to conduct.
John is
no.
the
Just
leader.
because he's attempting to doesn't mean he'll succeed. As with me. Anyway, so coax, coax, Lucy, I do have an actual question for you, which is to say,
Wait, we got to pause over this for a moment.
well, but it's about
We
the
just
nominal
got-
cacophony produced by a chorus. The fact that the choristers do not speak in perfect simultaneity, but necessarily have some variation that lends the chorus quality. It's not simply an amplification, but there's dissonance in the speech. Speak, please do to that.
Layers. We've got layers.
Well, this is where I think we go back to maybe the necessity for interpretive dance. Sorry, Joel, is that if you have a beat that is felt in your body, sometimes that is breath, sometimes that is an instrument beat. This is when breath starts to govern how you say your words, and this is where the unison comes from. So because you are moving, and also, you've got things like the Greek meter as well. I'm sure we're all very familiar with like an iambic pentameter. We know our Shakespeare, but the Greeks had a wide variety of different meters that they were using, quite complicated sometimes. Very cool, very heady, like, I won't go into one now, but like very, very cool, but potentially rigid, varied, but rigid. And so this was how you were ending up with a kind of unison speech that was, yes, amplified, but also kind of made overwhelming by the fact that of its unison.
All right, we are going to leave it there because, the revolution in morning television, I will not say is complete the day look, we've got interpretive dance going on. Coax. I'm not going to say it's complete.
Hey,
the
you
moment
people
we've
asked
done
for
that,
it, man.
But Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, eat this. CBC morning, eat this. You have never had 4 people show up on screen at the same time and do the croaking chorus of the Frogs of Aristophanes. But we beat you to it, and we did it without a script, without planning, just with the guidance of our very bewildered and spectacular guest, Lucy Jackson. Thank you for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. This was a blast.
We began with a rant and we ended with a chorus. Lucy, we have a rule on the show. which is that once you've been a guest, you are invited to show up anytime. That link will get you in, and you don't need to tell us when you're going to be here. We can't, you just, anytime you click that link, you will show up on screen. We are live every day, weekday at 8 o'clock Eastern time, or in whatever time district I happen to be. So, come back. This was great fun.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, for indulging me. Yeah, I mean, how could I not join a Greek chorus? What kind of choral scholar would I be if I weren't part of this? Thank you.
All right, we're going to stop this.